So last thing, I don't know if you heard, Sam Zell has passed away, the grave dancer.
We did. I did hear that, and for some reason I was sort of touched by it. I only met him one time. It's funny. We were supposed to meet in New York, and he was like, "I can't meet you tonight. My plans changed. But why don't you meet me tomorrow in Chicago?" And I was like,
"Oh,
yeah, I went to Chicago. I went to Chicago to meet with him. He was an interesting guy, and it was a nice meeting. And I don't know. He had a lot of personality.
Did he?
Like for a guy that age, this deep in the business, like you sort of expect somebody like that to sit back and listen to me pitch him, but it was like he was like just talking the whole time. Or maybe that's the effect journalists and people in media have on people. Everybody wants to tell you everything and their whole life story, and
that's cool.
That was sort of the conversation for that day. But I was sad to see him go. I always liked the fact that he didn't really have an unexpressed thought in his head. Like something came to it, he didn't care he was going to get canceled or what. He would just say whatever he wanted to say, and that backfired for him in a lot of ways, especially when he sold a large part of his portfolio and bought the whole Chicago Tribune and that whole media business.
That's right. So I got to tell you, like, for me as a New Yorker, we're not so impressed by our superstars or our athletes. I mean, it's dope and I have a lot of respect, but like, you don't pay my bills.
They come and go.
They come and go. So for him though, it was fascinating. It was like he was brash. He was straightforward. He had this great book. What was it called? Am I Being Too Subtle? Right? And in the book, I still remember 2 facts today. So the first one was, he's like, look for inefficiencies.
Yeah.
So I'm all over, right? You see it on technology and bringing that to real estate to find that inefficiency. And then there's this second thing when we talk about, like when you're talking about the developers, he would say, look at it. Your upside may be infinite, but you better mitigate your downside. And what people don't realize about developers, they come after you personally if you fail.
Yeah.
So your downside risk is huge and you have no guarantee on the upside. And it was the first one I was like, wow.
You're saying as a developer, the banks and investors come after you directly.
So you get all these riches, and that's what everyone is saying. Oh, the developer must be rich. That's if it won.
Yeah.
And then you just stated earlier, remember all those deals that you thought won big,
right.
They lost, right? At the end of the day, the buck stops at the developer. So your downside is somewhat infinite in that you'd be responsible for the debt and everyone's investors and the equity and everything else.
Yeah.
And your upside is sort of, yeah, it could be infinite, but most likely in the last few years, it hasn't been. He'd never make that deal.
Right.
He would only get into deals where he's like, my upside could be huge and my downside is limited.
Yeah, right.
And that was some of the things I thought about. So when I heard him pass, I wasn't lucky enough like yourself to have met him, but I was definitely like, we lost a pillar of some of the philosophies I even use.
Yeah, I mean, he was a legend. He definitely started he started a sector of the industry that didn't really exist, especially the size and scale that he created. And this was before the private equity banks and the Blackstones of the world got into the game. But something else that was funny about him, before I left the meeting, he gave me this book. He was like, these are my famous quotes. And I was like, oh, cool. So after I left, I was going through the book, and the book was all like not famous sayings, but like old wise tales. Like, there's always a silver lining in the cloud. And then there's like, better to have a hen in the hand than 2 in the bush. And I was like, these are like, how could you take credit for these? Yeah.